Are you freezing in this crazy cold weather? Let's talk about 10 ways that you can stay warm in a winter power outage. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene. And it is crazy cold in the United States right now. This cold front is making everybody really cold.
And even places like Houston are down in the 20s. Phoenix down in the 20s. It's a little crazy. Now, those are nighttime temperatures, but still, that's getting pretty cold.
And that can be inconvenient and a little bit miserable unless your power goes out. And then it can be downright deadly. So today we want to give you our top 10 tips for staying warm during a power outage in the middle of winter.
Number one, obviously keep the cold air out and the warm air in. So if you need to seal up some spots where you've got cold air coming in, if you need to insulate windows, whatever you can do to just keep the warm in.
This is an important tool. So painter's tape is a really great option because you can seal the edges of the doors, or you could tape up cardboard or plastic over your windows or whatever, and this won't ruin your paint when it comes off. If you use duct tape, it's gonna make a mess and you may be sorry later, but you'll still be alive. So it's always good to have a little bit of painter's tape around. Yeah. After you do that, we want to create a microenvironment. And I know that we've talked about this before, but that is probably our number one tip. And that is that you just put up a tent in your family room where you can go in and get warm. You'll be warmer inside that tent than you will be in your house. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways to accomplish that. You know, I've heard of people using freezer boxes. Now, it would be really hard to go out and get a big refrigerator box or one of those big boxes, but you want something where you can just have this small space where your body heat is actually going to warm the air. You could do, remember those forts we used to build when we were kids? You could put a blanket over the kitchen table. If there's bunk beds, you could put blankets over the top bunk bed and drape down and have both people sleep in that bed. There's all kinds of things, but that is the number one thing I think that can make you comfortable when a power outage happens if you don't have anything else.
Number three, dress in layers. You can put on a layer. If you're a little bit cold, you can take off a layer. One of the things we don't want to do is to sweat, because when we sweat, that moisture helps make us cold. So dress in layers so that you can make those adjustments as needed.
Moisture will just suck the heat right out of your body. And when we did an experiment, one of the things that I didn't do is wear a hat. You need shoes and socks or warm slippers and things on your hands. You want to make sure that you dress appropriately. Just putting that hat on your head will make a huge amount of difference. I can tell you, I've been there. In fact, if you want to see the video where we had little kids at the time, but we turned off our power in January just to see if we could survive. And we learned a lot of really good lessons. So click the card in the corner if you want to go back to the old days when we were young parents instead of old fogies.
Number five, blankets. And blankets have so many uses. You can use them to create little small microenvironments like we just talked about, or to cover a doorway that maybe you want to just keep the heat all into a smaller area of your home where you can heat it reasonably. Obviously for warmth, just for, when we did that experiment, we had probably 6 or 8 blankets on our bed just to add layers of insulation that kept the heat in. So blankets are awesome.
Over your windows, when you're keeping the heat in, you want to close your blinds, close your drapes, but another layer of additional, you could hang blankets over your windows to try and just make sure that that cold is staying out and the heat is staying in. Number 6 is warm drinks and food. So hopefully you've prepared an alternative method that is safe to cook in your house. We love the Vesta, but you could also, if you have nothing else, you could warm a cup of water for something warm, or warm a can of soup or something just by using candles. It takes a long time. You want to really try hard to be safe. It's important that you're safe, right? Of all things, you want to be safe. John made a really good point this morning about the hot water.
Oh yeah, if you've got hot water that's not heated with electricity, if you're using natural gas or propane, you've got that hot water. That is an excellent resource. You can fill hot water bottles. Obviously, if you're using like a quart jar, you want to make sure that that's sealed tight so you're not leaking, but a hot water bottle, any of those kinds of things create heat and can create these warm drinks and warm foods. And number 7, what alternative heat sources do you have? And make sure that they are safe. Carbon monoxide is such a huge risk. And every time we have some kind of a polar vortex or whatever, we hear all these tragic stories of people dying because of carbon monoxide poisoning and or fire risk. So just make sure that you're safe. But if you have an alternative heat source that is safe, try and heat just a small area. We talked about sectioning off a place because obviously you can't heat your whole home.
And if you are trying to heat like inside your microenvironment, inside your tent, you have to be super careful because that is much too small of an enclosed space. So when we talk about that, we're talking about partitioning off like your hallway and different doorways to make sure that you've just got a smaller room. If you are trying to heat inside your tent, you've got definitely some issues with fire, and you've also got some issues with not enough oxygen. So make sure that if you are doing that inside of your tent, that you are taking extra precautions and that you've got part of that door open, right? You have to have that air exchange in order to be safe. So be very mindful of that.
And from the safety aspect, make sure that you have a digital carbon monoxide detector so that you know if you've got a problem.
Those digital ones are really nice because the readout's right there. You can see, even if you have very low levels of carbon monoxide, you can see it before it ever alarms, and you can make some changes so that you're gonna be okay. Number 8 is something we don't think of very often. How about go to a warm place? Now, I recognize that if you are snowed in, you can't do that. But is it possible that you could go, if you know this is coming or you're just too cold, you could go spend some time with a neighbor? We would welcome friends or neighbors or family who needed to stay here for a day or two while they wait for this storm front to pass. Or go to a hotel in a place that's not affected by the power outage.
And while we're talking about family and friends, let's not forget about our neighbors, our community. Reach out to your neighbors. Make sure that they're okay, especially those who are maybe a bit fragile.
Yeah.
And number 9, be active. Now, again, we don't want to sweat because that's going to draw lots of heat out of our bodies. But being active keeps the blood flowing. And another thing that we need to make sure we recognize is make sure that we stay hydrated. And I think we talked a little bit about that, but keeping hydrated, make sure that the blood can flow easily. And as we're active, then that blood can flow and help keep us warm.
Okay, number 10, how about a snuggle buddy? When it's really cold, it might be a really good time just to snuggle under a blanket and take advantage of another person's warmth. Or how about one of your pets? Sometimes our pets can be really good lap warmers to help keep us warm and keep them warm. So don't underestimate the power of the heat that another human produces. It's one of my favorites.
About me?
I love to snuggle and get all nice and warm. So, okay, so those were 10 tips that we have about how to stay warm during a winter power outage. We pray that all of our friends out there will be safe and that this will pass and that we can work on doing other great things to make sure that we are prepared. But remember to keep in mind your friends and neighbors and do whatever we can do to help each other thrive.
And now for the question of the day. What other tips can you offer to help people stay warm during this crazy cold spell and any time that we're super cold and we don't have power? Tell us about your experiences. Share with us. And thanks for being part of the solution.
And be safe. Don't do anything stupid.
Double thumbs up on that one.